Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is Delegating PowerShell Scripts to the Service Desk.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So I think before I dive into what PowerScripts can do, we'll just revisit the problem that we're trying to solve. And that's some of the challenges that you face with PowerShell. I think there's some problems that are unique to small companies, some that are unique to larger companies, and some that everybody faces. So I'll start with the smaller organizations. And with smaller organizations, they tend to only have one or two people who understand PowerShell well enough to write and execute scripts. And sometimes they have none. And when you just have one and the guru leaves, then a lot of the knowledge that you have is lost when that person goes out. I think that one of the challenges with PowerShell is that it's kind of it's in that tween state where you have to be technical enough to be able to script them, but not so technical that you could get, promoted off the service desk and have a full-time developer job. So it's hard to find those people that fit that exact slice. In larger organizations like banks and defense contractors and things like that are security conscious, they tend to put restrictions on PowerShell. We are working with a couple of banks, and both of them have a policy that PowerShell is not allowed on the desktops, even for some of the IT people, which is great from a security perspective, but a lot of problems are really best solved with a PowerShell script. And some of them you can only solve with a PowerShell script, or if you do it through the admin portal, you solve it by following a procedure that's 10 steps long or something. But if you really want to automate and be efficient, PowerShell is the way to go. The problems that require PowerShell get escalated up from the service desk because the service desk isn't allowed to run PowerShell. And then it bounces up to the tier that's finally able to execute scripts, which is not necessarily an efficient way to do that. That tends to be your more senior IT people, and you would rather have those people focused on project work. So some of the common challenges that organizations of all sizes face is that native PowerShell is not auditable. So if somebody runs a script on the desktop and a couple days later, an end user is complaining about their mailbox or some team or something, and you want to say, hey, who did that? There's no easy way to go back and figure out what script was run against it that might have made the difference. The other challenge is that the way that Microsoft has set up the various tiers of access, they tend to be all or nothing. So if you're an mail admin, then you have mail admin privileges even on PowerShell, and you can pretty much do anything the mail admin can do. And even worse, if you have global admin or team admin, even though they give you some level of control, it's not as fine as what a lot of security conscious companies want. And the reason they want such fine control is that programming code is a lot like matches. Matches are very helpful when you need a fire to cook your dinner, but you can also make a mistake and accidentally burn down the forest. So it's a trade-off on that thing. So the solution to these challenges is what we call PowerScripts. And PowerScripts is a secure execution environment in which to run PowerShell scripts. It's a hard thing to explain. It's an easy thing to demo. So I'm going to jump into a demo in just a bit. But the idea is that PowerScripts is an extendable library of PowerShell scripts that you run against a specific Microsoft object, or you run it inside your tenant. And anything that you can script in PowerShell, you can turn into a PowerScript that allows you to securely delegate it down to the service desk or lower and have an audit trail with it. So what it gives you is repeatable, consistent results every time. And the key thing is that you get these results at the lowest possible entry point. So you minimize the level of escalation that you have to do, and you get a boost in efficiency at the same time that you get a boost in security. And I know these are bold claims, but I'm going to demo this and show you why that's true. So typical use cases, what would you use a PowerScript for? for turning on or off multi-factor authentication. And we just did another custom script for one of our customers to remove all the multi-factor devices for a particular customer. You can use it for new employee onboarding, and at the other end of the spectrum for terminations, friendly terminations where somebody is leaving in 2 weeks and you want to move over their OneDrive and you want to do it all orderly. And then there's also sometimes urgent terminations where you need to clear all the tokens right away, that the person, you want them to be locked out as soon as they step out of HR. And some of the more typical mundane day-to-day stuff, adding and removing users to groups and teams, assigning licenses to people, granting access to shared mailboxes, that kind of stuff. But you can do all of this without granting, and in quotes, global admin rights. So giving service desk global admin rights is the worst thing you could do. But even if you bump it down a tier and just give them team admin rights or just mail admin rights, there's still a lot of potential trouble that they could get into, whether it's with malice or just ignorance. So how does it work? The experience from the service desk perspective, a person who would actually be using this, and by a user, I typically mean a low level or junior entry level IT person. So that IT user will use Active Directory or Azure AD and log into the product as themselves. So we know who it is. So we can, then what they do is let's say they have a ticket, and the ticket says, I need you to add this user to this group. So they next select an object, such as a user or a group or a mailbox, and that's the thing that they're going to run the script against. Next, they select a script from the script library. So if it was the case of, add a user to a group, search for the group, select the script, which would be add user to group. And then the last thing is you enter the parameters that the script requires. So in the case of add a user to a group, the parameter would be the user principal name of the person you want to add to the group. Then you push the run button. And then the service desk job is done. Everything else happens under the hood, if you will, in the background. So in the background, what's happening is that PowerShell script runs in our execution environment using elevated credentials that are encrypted of what the end user has, because the end user cannot bypass the system and run scripts directly. And then when the script finishes, it will pop up a little notification and tell them that it's done. And then every transaction that they run through the product leaves an audit trail behind. So you might think, all right, well, how is that any safer? People could still run amok with this thing. No, they can't, because the users, and again, by users, I mean junior IT users, they can only run the scripts that they're authorized to run only against objects that they're authorized to modify. For example, you might have a library of 100 scripts, and for whatever reason, that junior IT people can only run 75 of them, or there's some scripts that you only want certain people to have access to. Or another scenario for one of our customers, World Vision, that we did is the service desk people all have access to the same scripts, but they don't all have access to the same objects. So the Middle East team can only make changes to Middle East users, not North American users, and the European team can only make changes to the European team, and so forth. So the first thing is they can only run scripts that they're authorized to run and against objects that they're authorized to modify. They cannot modify the scripts. There's no modification of the scripts allowed except by the senior IT people. And the user has no access to the underlying credentials that it actually runs on. And then finally, it leaves the audit trail. Now what I've done is I've switched over to the Vital Signs tab, and PowerScripts is a feature in our Vital Signs product. The Vital Signs product is 10 plus years in the marketplace, and I'm going to run a couple of scripts. So the first one I'm going to do is kind of a long running one. It's an example of a report. So I call it a tenant script, and a tenant script basically means it's something that runs in your tenant. So it's an Office 365 script, and I want to run it in my RPR Vital Signs tenant, and it's the script to get mailbox permissions. Here it is, mailbox permissions report. All right, so I press execute, and now this script is running in the background with some elevated credentials, and I can just leave that alone. So typically what a service desk person would have to do is they'd have a ticket that comes in, and let's say they want to change somebody's title. So I'm going to use myself, Alan Forbes, and here's the user. So we have a mailbox object and a user object that matches the string Forbes. So first you pick the object, right? And then you select the script. So here's a list of all the scripts that I'm authorized to run. And this is going to be one that calls update user settings. And here are the parameters that I can fill in, and then I push the execute button. So first I'm going to just jump over to the admin center over here and show you what my current title is. So I am manage contact information. So I'm a product manager in the engineering department, right? So close that. I'll come over to vital signs. So let's say we got the ticket that he got a promotion. So I'm not a product manager anymore. Now I'm a senior product manager. I got that promotion as part of switching departments. So now I work in the Internet of Things. Now I push the button. So again, what I did is I just searched for an object, picked the object. The object is the Alan Forbes user, selected a script from the list, and then I filled in the parameters and pushed execute. So in the meantime, you see this little toast popped up. It said the mailbox permissions script is finished. And now this one is also finished, and it comes back with this little message here that says user settings updated. And this toast popped up as well. So let me clear those. So I'm currently logged in as Harry Help Desk, and there's an audit log that Harry can see the scripts that he ran. So I could go look at the mailbox permissions report, and you can see here it is going through the mailbox, and then you can click here to download the actual file. And then this one I just did, the update user settings. You can see Harry Help Desk ran this script, the update user settings script, and passed the following parameters to it. And here's what the script came back with. Now we can go over to the admin center and see if I click on this user again. Now you see my title is upgraded and my department is changed. So we were able to do that without really having to know anything, without having to navigate the admin center, and without having the rules, the rights to do it. Basically just search for a user, picked a script, filled in the parameters, and off it went. There's a team called product design team. And if I look at the members, there's nobody in there called Wes. Wes is my co-presenter. I haven't let him speak yet, but eventually I will. So we're going to go over to PowerScripts here, and I'm going to look for product design. See how this script finished in the background here. So that's what's nice, that is you just fill out the parameters, hit the execute button, and then you can move right onto your next ticket. So here's my team, and the team, I want to add a team member, and that script takes a user UPN, which I just happen to have on my clipboard. So I want to fill in Wes here, and I push the button. These are all variations on a theme. So basically the theme is find the object, select the script, fill in the parameters, push the button. So there's not a lot of room for mistakes by the junior service desk people. I can't get in there and monkey around with a script. I can't abuse my credentials to do something I wasn't supposed to do. So this script is now finished, comes back, West Stanulis has been added to the group. So we'll close that off. And just in the interest of showing you that it's really working, you can see how the other thing, the reason why I keep switching back and forth is you can see that in the PowerScripts, there's really only one process that you have to go through. But when you're using the Microsoft Admin Center, there's often multiple clicks, and there's different places to go for teams and different places to go for users and for managing groups. And we do have Wes as a member here now. So the last thing that I want to show is that for some of these scripts, they can also be quite customized. So let's say in the case of Titleist, we did this new hire process for them. The way that it works is you locate the manager, and then you click on new hire, and then you put in the name of the new person. So search for Wesley, double click, and you see we have all kinds of scripts for users. So you can, block the user, enable the user, assign a license, add the user to a group, turn off MFA, get their licenses, give user access to the mailbox. I don't have time in this webinar to go through all the scripts, but suffice it to say that it's all the things, the basic use cases that the service desk can do, plus the power of adding your own custom scripts to it. So this one is a little more advanced, and it was customized. It's not in the product, but we could do something similar like that. The way it works for them is you specify which domain they're going to be associated with this new hire, what region they're going to be in, first name, location, title, enter, and they're going to be an employee. And then you push execute, and it goes through all the process of creating the new on-prem AD user, putting them in the right groups, assigning them an email account, then replicating it up to the cloud. All the stuff that normally took multiple steps before and was often error prone is all completely wrapped up in a single script here. I'm not going to push execute because we're not really going to hire this guy. All right, now all of this that I've done so far was from the interface or the perspective of a help desk person. So instead, what I'm going to do is log out here, and I'm going to log in as an administrator, as a senior IT person. So now when I come in, you see I've got a whole lot more items on the menu. And I also have something called the PowerScript Settings. And this is kind of the executive dashboard. So here, what it's showing you is, first off, here's all the people on your service desk and how many scripts they've run. So how active are they? So Harry Help Desk, if I click on Harry, I can drill down and see, all right, he ran a mailbox permissions report and update group settings and added a team member. These are the things that I just did in front of you. And then over on this side, you can see, all right, well, what kind of scripts are the service desk running and who's actually running those? So I can click on that and do a drill down. It's a little boring of just today's worth of transactions, but if I go back and go into a longer time frame, you can see, here's what Freddie did, and here's what Harry did, and here's what Heidi did. So I can drill down. This is basically the audit trail, but with a graphical look to it. So that audit trail itself is a little drier. I showed you the audit trail from the perspective of Harry Help Desk, but you get a little more information when you're an administrator. So here's the add team member script, the most recent one that I just ran. And it, again, shows you who ran it, when they ran it, what parameters they passed to it, what did the script output as a response. But here you can also see the actual script that the person ran. And that's part of the audit trail. So this script takes two parameters. It takes the team ID, the name of the team basically, and the name of the user that you want to add to the team. And then it runs through a couple of try-catch blocks here. So it tries to get the team, tries to get the user. If there is no such user, it'll come back and say, you don't have such a user in your organization. I can't add that user to the team. It also checks to see if the team is valid. So if there's no such team, if it passes through all of that, then it will come through and check to see if the person isn't already a member of the team or already an owner, because if they're already an owner, you can't add them as a member. And then it eventually will come back and specify that the person was added to the team, which is like this little bit at the end here. So the output from the PowerShell script is anytime in the script you see write output. Write output is what builds the audit trail and lets the help desk person know that they did it. Well, let me jump over here to scripts management. This is the script library. And the script library is where all the scripts live. And again, this is just basic, PowerShell stuff. If you're a PowerShell programmer, you'll recognize this immediately. If you're not a PowerShell programmer, the good news is that we already wrote all these things. And we have a team of PowerShell people, with Wes being the best at it. And these scripts have all been tested 100 times before we put them in the product. And in fact, as long as I'm here, let's take a look at that new hire script. Wes, why don't you talk a little bit about this script and how you developed it, and just like what's the difference between a PowerShell, classic PowerShell script and a PowerScript? How did you convert that?
Sure. So I guess the first thing, the most important thing to really note that the difference between the two is that when you actually execute a PowerScript, everything is being done behind the scenes. So in many PowerScripts, you might be along the way, might say, okay, can I have the user's name? So the person inputs the user's name, and then it goes through some more lines within the script, and then it might ask, which department should this user be added to? Which team should this user be added to? Which group should this user be added to? Et cetera, et cetera. So since PowerScripts are being done behind the scenes, everything has to be taken as a parameter, which if you look to see where Alan highlighted on the screen there, we take in multiple parameters there. So for instance, there's domain, DC region, first name, last name, and so on and so forth. Some other things which we are able to utilize from PowerShell is having different, like more or less customizing the view that the user sees. So I'll mention the one that Alan has highlighted right now. So that one, if you look on that line, it does have a help message. So typically within PowerShell, that will give the user some information about that parameter. Within PowerScripts, we're utilizing that to make a user-friendly parameter name. So in this case, the actual variable name within PowerShell is first name. And yes, that's kind of like you can tell what that is, but at the same time, there's no space, or if there's a more complicated name, that might not be too obvious to the user what is intended there. So if you look to the left of that, there is a help message equals first space name. And that's more or less what the user would see when they go to input that variable. So you can more or less make that anything you want. It could be as simple as what we did here by just adding a space, or it could just be a completely different name that you would like.
It's basically the label for the prompt.
Yep.
And then whatever they type in, gets assigned to this variable. And if you don't have a prompt, then we use the variable name as the prompt. So you could do something like user underscore location, but that's not quite as friendly as, please enter the last name or the first name.
And then on the line above that, we do have, well, a couple lines up there. We do have another type of attribute which we're using from PowerShell is validate set. And more or less what that does is it only allows those values to be inputted into that variable. So from the user point of view, we are just more or less displaying a dropdown. So if you have certain domains or certain servers or like Active Directory forests or anything like that, you can easily populate this list. So the user just has to click on a dropdown and click it in. So that way there's no way the user can have any typos or not really know what values it's looking for. So hopefully that should decrease any errors that might come from the user side of it all.
And then because it's PowerShell, you basically can just script anything that you want to. So this, we kind of anonymized it, but it is Titleist that we did it for. And they have a number of domains that they own, and the email formatting is slightly different. So here they just kind of check to see, well, if it's this domain, then it's underscore. And if it's this domain, it's a dot, because for some of them, it's, it would be Alan.Forbes, and in other ones, it would be Alan_Forbes. And there's rules for that. And the junior people would consistently get that wrong. And now there's no chance of them getting it wrong because it just happens under the hood and they don't have to know anything about it. So it takes that information and eventually comes down here and builds the mail name. So the first name plus the domain character plus the last name, plus an @ plus the domain that they selected. And then it builds the display name and it does all this stuff. And eventually it gets down to the bottom and, creates an AD user, or checks to make sure that the user doesn't already exist. That was another mistake that the service desk was constantly making. And then it all comes down to this gigantic new AD user with the following parameters that get built onto it. And that's what actually creates the new hire in the background. And then it comes back and checks to make sure that the person was created properly and takes that stuff back and pipes it out to a formatted list so they can see that it actually worked. So do either of you guys have any questions for Wes on how the scripts actually work under the hood? All right, awesome. Jump back to the presentation.
Al, I think there might have been a question there.
Oh,
no, I was saying I'm good. Thank you for going over it.
Thanks, Kevin. Glad you're still out there. So we make the claim that the product will save or pay for itself, and through some of the expected savings would be direct expenses. I think that you can reasonably claim that if you take a typical transaction and run it through PowerScripts and time how long it takes, and then look at doing the same thing through the admin panel, you can often shave 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes per transaction. And what that means is you can cut the cost of doing those transactions down by that amount, which can translate into either getting more done with less staff or getting the same amount of work done in a shorter period of time, freeing people up to do other things. And some of the indirect expenses that you can shave is in reduced compliance costs. And really the big one is in reducing the escalations, because every escalation means that there's this transition period, and then the person that it gets escalated to has to read the ticket again, starting from scratch, all the stuff, the same kind of stuff the service desk did in the first place, only to discover that they couldn't do it, has to get done again. I think a typical escalation is going to take at least 30 minutes in effort and possibly a couple of hours in duration before the ticket actually gets resolved. And so a real life example of that, I showed you the executive dashboard. Here's a screenshot that I snapped from one of our customers. And in 2 months, they ran 449 scripts. And if they saved 10 minutes for each one, that's 75 hours worth of savings. And if you're just conservative and say, all right, well, it cost us about $100 an hour, then that's $7,500 in just 2 months. So, Jim, how could they try it?
Right.
If they were interested.
Well, you can test drive. Test drive it, take a free evaluation of it, start your evaluation in the next 30 days, and we will give you a script for your organization's specific needs. Now we can put it on a box in your facility for you if you have a VM or something of that nature, or if you want us to host it, we could even host it for you for a marginal fee during a 20-30 day evaluation period. But we find that once it's evaluated, it's usually picked up. So we're very excited about getting folks to evaluate this if at all possible.
Yeah, it's one thing to see, my dashboard, but it's another thing when you see it when it's your own scripts that are running in there, and the service desk people are actually doing things that you used to have to do yourself, and they're doing it without mistakes.
And that and the management reporting really makes a difference. It gives you an insight into what's going on.
Yeah.
And as you go further and further in the Office 365 world, you're going to be using more scripts. All right. There's my contact information. I'd be delighted to facilitate an evaluation for you or whatever, or any follow-up questions you might have. Please feel free to do that. I thank everybody for participating today. We appreciate the time and energy you put to end the webinar, and we'd be delighted to answer any questions in the follow-up capacity.